Camera number 374 is the Pentax P50. It's a manual focus SLR, but does require batteries to power all its operations. And the batteries are two LR44s, so we'll go ahead and place those in the battery compartment, which is on the base here. So the batteries have to go with the positive terminal facing down into the camera. So that's, as I say, two LR44 batteries. And while we're doing the battery door compartment up, we can see on the base there is the usual suspects of tripod mount, and also provision to fit a motor wind. And then on the left hand side here, where my finger is, or thumb rather, a little button that disengages the film advance so that we can rewind our film into the canister. All done manually, film advance and film rewind. So looking at the front of the camera, we have the lens, and the lens release button is just here where my thumb is, so we rotate that. And we can see there are terminals, so the idea is that with the K-mount, or Pentax K-mount, manual focus, yes, but if we have, as I have here, a KA mount, i.e. it's a Pentax K with an automatic, then it can synchronize with that, and therefore opens up other functions of the Pentax P50, but we'll come back on to that in a few moments. Meanwhile, we have a preview meter lever, and then our self-timer button or illuminator, and then a go faster grip, but that can come off if we want, but I won't take that off because it's quite fiddly to put back on. So let's put the lens back on, and then turning to the top plate, we have our film rewind crank, which when lifted allows us to put our film in. You'll notice there's provision for DX coding, and in fact the camera prefers DX coded film, and if we don't have a DX coded cartridge, then the film will revert to 100 ISO, so something to bear in mind. Okay. And then just to the left we have a exposure compensation button. Let's just turn our camera on, which we do by pushing the button on here, and if we put it into well, let's deal with those modes, shall we? So there's the on off, and then we switch our modes. Now that depends on what lens we have. So if we take off and simulate just a Pentax K, you'll notice that it's A, which is basically aperture priority. So we change the aperture and the camera will select the appropriate shutter speed, and we can see that on the liquid crystal display on the top. And indeed, when you look through the viewfinder, we only get shutter speeds. We don't actually see aperture indicators there. So something to bear in mind when looking through or buying the camera. We only get shutter speeds. So auto is aperture priority, and then to change we have to use the up and down buttons. So I've now gone into manual mode, and now we can choose our shutter speeds and change our aperture as well. And then you get a metered manual, so it shows you what in fact, let me just check what it does. Metered manual mode, the camera will select a aperture that it thinks is correct, but it will also show you what you've chosen, and the idea is that you move the button or press the button until they both correspond through the viewfinder. I hope I haven't made that more difficult than I should have done. So that's manual mode, and that's the only two modes you really get, aperture priority and manual mode, when you have a K lens. However, if we move it to the A, we now open up a couple of program modes. We've got sports mode, which basically is where the camera will choose faster shutter speeds, and take care of all the exposure. So we just literally point and shoot. Now the only downside, of course, is that, as I've mentioned earlier, we only get aperture. We don't know, shutter speeds. We don't know what aperture the camera has chosen in that, which could be a problem, because when we go into the next program mode, which is landscape, so the program will tend to choose large apertures to make sure that everything is in focus, which is what you want in landscape mode. But there is no indicator through the viewfinder what the camera's actually chosen. And that's the only two modes we have, really, in addition to the ones I've just mentioned. Our shutter actuation button, our film advance, and our film counter is on the right there. We do have a memory lock button, which is nice to include there, and a button, or rather a cable release, which is the screw type there, which is nice. And that's it, I think, as far as the functions go. Oh no, there is one more. Self-timer. To do the self-timer, we have to press a little button down and push up the on-off switch, and then when we activate the shutter button, we can see our light counts down to approximately 10 seconds and then takes our image. So we just count down, and there we go. So that is the Pentax P50.